Hi, I'm Heather King, and today I want to talk about a subject very dear to my heart, vocation. Having graduated from law school many years ago, more or less in an alcoholic blackout, and then having worked for a time, I came to, got sober, and worked for a time as a lawyer, and had a huge spiritual crisis and realized I was not born to be a lawyer. And finding my way to my vocation as a writer. It's really one of the central graces of my life. Besides getting sober and coming into the church, really the central grace. Um, and I hope to actually sort of focus on vocation, especially the vocation of the artist. Artist having a broad definition to my mind. Um, but in these YouTubes and in a podcast that I eventually hope to start. But today I want to focus on this woman who's very, very high in my pantheon of what I call my personal communion of saints, and that is the blues singer Billie Holiday. As you may or may not know, I write a weekly arts and culture column for Angelus News, the archdiocesan newspaper of LA. I think I'm into my 7th year. I actually wrote a piece about Billie Holiday earlier this year. And in the course of my research, I came across this wonderful book, 2018 book by a professor named Tracy Fessenden. I think it's Fessendon. And it's called Religion and Billie Holiday. Wonderfully written, deeply felt book. And it turns out Billie Holiday went to this kind of Catholic reform school for colored girls when she was young. You probably know the details or some of the background of her life. I mean, just terribly sexually abused, for starters, from a very young age, broken home. But at this school, she actually learned Gregorian chant and liturgical voice, and obviously the rubrics of the faith. She actually, when she died, she had a Requiem Mass in New York City. So she always had this kind of, I think, if you've been trained in any way as a Catholic, probably you kind of carry that. But anyway, that's not to try to commandeer Billie Holiday to the Catholic faith, and Tracy Fessenden totally doesn't do that. But I just watched a ton of YouTubes of her, and this is just from my piece, some of what captures me about her: the regal bearing, even when singing, of the men who abused her, the heart-stopping phrasing, the ever so slightly tilted head, the between the beat silences, the eyes that challenge and plead, mourn and defy all at once, her incredible sense of self, a kind of contained, built on solid rock integrity that no outside force, no man, no Jim Crow law, no trauma even could touch or defile. So I have deep respect for her. And this is and this is a big contradiction about one of the many paradoxes about it, because she did have this. She never compromised with her music. She had a deep, deep sense of what her gift was, that it was not to be just kind of, you don't prostitute your gift. You might prostitute your body, you don't prostitute your gift. And therefore, and she was also, she kind of insisted upon being with these horrible men, whatever. I mean, people have kind of tried to psychoanalyze her, but she really was with terribly abusive men and almost, I think, invited that. And then during the civil rights movement, so she wasn't the darling of the feminists. And then during the civil rights movement, she was criticized by some people for not being more outspoken. And Tracy Fessenden quotes this other author. Her name is Michelle Wallace, who also has written about Billie Holiday. And she had this great observation. And she said, Billie Holiday may not have been politically correct, but she was existentially correct. And I have really pondered that for months since. Because Billie Holiday, by the way, also had this huge heart. She opened her door. She was notoriously profligate with money, with food. She would cook for anyone. She'd open her door to anyone, pimps, addicts, prostitutes. I think, couldn't have children, or at least didn't. And that was a longing of her heart. And she had this dream of opening an orphanage. And then her other dream was to have this little 200-seat supper club, just where she could cook for her friends, sort of 200 seats max. And she would cook and mingle and sing. I mean, tell me this person did not go straight to heaven. I mean, there are stars in that crown, man. So to me, that is existentially correct, and as much or maybe most to the point that she never, in spite of the horrible lifelong suffering of various kinds, emotional, mental, physical, obviously. At the end, she died of cirrhosis, chained to a bed. She was arrested, scandal on the FBI sort of surveillance list. But she never lost sight. She was faithful to her vocation. She never stopped singing. I mean, unless she was literally having, detoxing or jonesing or something. And I think, and that's what ties in with vocation, because for my own part, when I was working as a lawyer in Beverly Hills in the early 90s and had this massive crisis of kind of vocation and conscience, I knew while I was going to law school. Of course, I was drinking unbelievably at the time. I was sober by this time, but when I was actually working as a lawyer. But I didn't want to be a lawyer back then. I had absolutely no capacity or desire for it. Once I got sober, I kind of thought, oh, people would give their right arm to have a law degree, so I guess I should be grateful and do something with this. But anyway, so I had this big, I just wanted to like shoot myself all the time. I just absolutely was a fish out of water. I had a big crisis of vocation. And well, this is before I even became a Catholic, but I was searching and seeking and reading. And I had this thought, no one put this thought into my head, but I thought, because I had this deep call of my heart, truly a call, not an audible call, but next thing to it. I mean, it was unmistakable. I couldn't believe I hadn't killed it, squelched it during those years of drinking. It was there. It was loud. And I realized that I could fail at it. I could never make a cent at it. I could be bad at it. But if I did not at least try it, if I did not respond to the call, that would be literally the worst sin that I had ever committed, which, trust me, is saying something with my life in the bars. Liar, cheat, thief, promiscuous. I mean, and I think we have a natural sense, I certainly did, just that we'll kind of be called to give an account of ourselves someday. I think that's a very human, you don't have to be religious to feel that way. Otherwise, what would our lives here matter? And my sense is they matter absolutely. So I really feel, and this is one of Billie Holiday's biographers, Tom Duffy is his name. He took Holiday's oral history and crafted a book around it. Anyway, wherever people were lonely, isolated, afflicted, Duffy observed, there was Billie Holiday. That is existential correctness. And I am convinced that is what is going to separate the sheep from the goats. Were you faithful to your call? And were you kind to people? Were you generous? Did you take some time out and feed someone or sit down and eat with someone. So anyway, that's there you go. Billie Holiday, wonderful book, Religion and Billie Holiday by Tracy Fessenden. And I think maybe just an invitation for all of us to maybe examine our own consciences and hearts a little more deeply, just in the off chance that we have a call in our hearts, that we may not. If you're anything like me, you'll do a lot to avoid it. And it took me years and years to get to it. But so maybe just kind of ponder that a little bit. And because I think if we really, really want to follow it, then we're given a way to do that. So anyway, thank you so much. I hope to see you again very soon.